Ama Bay Kemal, 14 Mayıs'ta bu aziz millet, benim bu sevgili vatandaşlarım sana sandıkları mezar edecek. Buna hazır mıyız?
Turkiye's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has stepped up his rhetoric against his opponents. In this incident, he claimed that the country could turn ballot boxes into graves for his main rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. But what about the mass graves that had to be dug up this year? The 6th of February, nearly 40,000 people were killed and scores injured by devastating earthquakes that struck southeastern Turkey near the southern border.
Our loved ones are still under the debris. There is no one to rescue them. We are all waiting here. Please help us, please. I am appealing to my president to help us. Where is the help that you said you've sent? Where is it?
But was it only the magnitude of the tremors that wreaked havoc? Nature alone isn't to blame. Poor construction also contributed to the devastation. Erdogan pledged to rebuild the country's southern region by the start of 2024 and also wipe out traces of the destruction. Three months on, the victims of the earthquakes are still struggling. In Antakya, the southernmost province of Turkey, a retired construction worker, Ali Simen, looks at a pile of rubble that almost killed him and remains disheartened.
Çevremdeki yakınlarım, arkadaşlarımın hepsi enkaz altında öldü. Herkes. Devlet 3 gün sonra...
Most of my family perished here. Some of us were saved by volunteers after 3 days. Those volunteers saved us, while the state left us to die. Removing the rubble alone will take at least a year.
Ama bu mekanda, bu şartlar altında ancak bir yılda burası temizlenir.
For the victims, shock has given way to anger. The upcoming parliamentary and presidential elections on the 14th of May will be set against this backdrop. Will the aftermath of the earthquakes also create shockwaves on election day? Who are the contenders who can challenge Erdogan? And a look at the Turkish president's 20-year reign and the fight to stay in power. The election will serve as a critical inflection point for Turkey. It has massive consequences for Turkey's democracy and economy. But for many of those who lost homes and loved ones in the earthquakes, the upcoming vote only triggers more fear, anger, and apathy.
Gideceğine sandıkların buraya gelmesi.
How can you vote in the earthquake zone among the corpses? How can you vote amidst the smell of rotting corpses? How can you force these people to vote like this under those circumstances?
Kullanmaya gidebilirsiniz. Yani bu insanları buna nasıl zorlayabilirsiniz?
Shortly after the quakes, the Turkish president asked for forgiveness over rescue delays.
Sarsıntıların yıkıcı etkisi, olumsuz hava şartları, hasar gören altyapının getirdiği zorluklar gibi sebeplerle maalesef İlk birkaç gün Adıyaman'da arzu ettiğimiz etkinlikte çalışma yürütemedik.
but the people of Turkey remain furious at the government's lackluster response.
There's still a huge impact of the earthquake. Problem that people are facing 3 months after the tremors is that especially housing problems. The earthquake affected an area of around 10 to 15 million people, and around 3 million people have left this area to other provinces of the country, many of them to live with relatives or whoever could afford housing, they move also to another provinces. But many people still in the area, living in tents, living in containers provided by the government, and waiting for their houses to be rebuilt. Erdogan promised to rebuild houses in a period of 1 year. It's one of his electoral promises.
In the run-up to the polls, Turks have had much to complain about, from the state's slow response to the earthquakes to an economy that's completely in ruins.
I'd say those responsible are the ones governing us. They are making all the decisions about the economy and the country. I think they have made a wrong decision. I used to be an AKP supporter, but I'm not thinking of voting for them anymore.
This is Hakim Ikinci, a barber who lives in Istanbul. He blames Erdogan's economic policies for the country's skyrocketing inflation. The economy is a key issue heading into the elections. But why is Turkey's economy in such a mess? In late 2021, unorthodox interest rate cuts sought by Erdogan sparked a devaluation of the Turkish lira. It sent inflation to a 24-year peak of 85.5%. Ahead of the elections in April this year, annual inflation slowed to 43.68%. But experts believe Erdogan risks losing, largely due to the cost of living crisis.
We are poor people, of course. I would like the price of whatever goes into the kitchen to decrease. It's a good thing for us. We cannot buy meat. If we buy vegetables today, we can't afford them the next day.
Annual inflation has remained in double digits for nearly all of 5 years since the 2018 general elections. The president is campaigning on a pledge of lowered interest rates. He's also promised to boost economic growth. In fact, the country ushered in the new year with significant pay hikes for minimum wage earners, pensioners and civil servants. But is it enough?
The government gives a 30% increase in the salary we receive, but the inflation is 150 to 200%. We are feeling oppressed. We have the right to live, we gave our years and paid our taxes, but we have not had a moment of peace and comfort.
Apart from hyperinflation, an economic downturn, a spiraling cost of living crisis, and the earthquake's staggering reconstruction bill, Turkey is also going through a colossal housing crisis. According to data from Turkey's central bank, property prices in February recorded an annual increase of 141.5%. The earthquakes have also compounded the issue as survivors seek shelter. What has Erdogan's AK party done to improve the situation?
Mentioned inflation, the economy the lira is way down in terms of its purchasing power, speaking of friends in Turkey. I mean, in terms of it's quite disastrous and needs to be fixed, number one. Number two, if you're talking about the common people, then we can talk about the earthquake. And again, I cannot underestimate the importance of that. You have many deaths, homelessness. You also have people displaced. But I think the biggest challenge for Turkey now is on its economy. And after the earthquake, that has now been a shell shock to Turkey.
The upcoming vote is the president's toughest test in 20 years. 69-year-old Erdogan hopes to extend his rule into a third decade. He's reshaped his country more than any leader since Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the revered father of the modern republic. Erdogan is Turkiye's longest-serving leader. A political giant, he's held many key roles in the country's politics. The May 14 elections will put in place a new parliament and a new president. Six opposition parties have combined forces for these elections, picking opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, a former civil servant, as their unity candidate. And while four candidates are running for the post of the president, Erdogan's main rival in the race is Kılıçdaroğlu. But what is the election process like for appointing the most powerful person in the country? Turkey holds its presidential elections every 5 years. The presidential election happens in 2 rounds. The candidate who receives over 50% of votes in the first round is elected president. But in case there is no clear winner, the election enters a second round between the 2 most voted candidates from the first round. Since people directly vote for their president, he or she cannot be removed from office before the end of their term. Turkiye will be voting on the 14th of May, and the results are expected to be announced later on the same day. The second presidential ballot, if it takes place, will be held on the 28th of May. The elections are already being touted as the toughest ever for Erdogan, as the country witnesses a fiery election battle unfold. Let's look at how Erdogan has shaped Turkey in the last 20 years. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has steered his country through a period of extraordinary change. In August 2001, Erdogan, a former mayor of Istanbul, founded a new Islamist-rooted party. It was called the Adalet ve Kalkınma Partisi, or the AKP. It's also known as the Justice and Development Party. In 2002, the AKP won a majority in the parliamentary elections. The following year, Erdogan was appointed Prime Minister. From 2003 until 2014, he spent 3 terms as Prime Minister. In his first decade in power, he won praise internationally as a reformer, as he presided over a period of steady economic growth. But his critics warned he was becoming increasingly autocratic. In 2013, many took to the streets to register their protest. These became famous as the Gezi Park protests. What started as an environmental cause snowballed into civil unrest and anti-Erdogan demonstrations. The government responded rather forcefully by launching police raids on the protesters, who were severely beaten and tear-gassed.
This year it will be the 10th anniversary of this protest, are considered a turning point for the country because it was the point where Erdogan switched the way he was governing into a more authoritarian rule. After those protests, he kind of felt a fear of losing his position as a prime minister and started to repress all these groups, activists, journalists, political parties that he felt that were a threat to his governments. Even some of them are having a sentence of life sentence, and they are currently in prison.
In the same year, the Erdogan-led government also lifted a decades-old ban on women wearing headscarves in public services. Erdogan was widely accused of forcing his Islamic values on the majority Muslim but staunchly secular nation. And then this happened. A deadly coup attempt shook Turkiye in 2016. In the early hours of the 16th of July, a section of the Turkish military launched a coordinated operation to topple the government and unseat President Erdogan. While commandos attempted to capture Erdogan, who was vacationing at a resort, soldiers and tanks took to the streets. Acting on a tip-off, Erdogan managed to escape. The coup failed. The government blamed Fethullah Gulen, a Turkish cleric and businessman, for plotting the coup with his followers. Gulen, a former ally of Erdogan, denies any involvement in the coup. Days after the coup attempt, Erdogan was accused of launching a witch hunt. Ankara declared a state of emergency that continued for 2 years. Courts placed tens of thousands of suspects under arrest. Erdogan was accused of using the incident to stamp out the opposition. In 2017, the ruling Justice and Development Party put forward an 18-article constitutional reform package. It would transform the country's parliamentary system into a powerful executive presidency. The Turkish people voted in favor of changing their constitution, granting the president new far-reaching powers. With this, Erdogan secured sweeping powers and became the center of Turkiye's entire political system.
The president has certain powers that maybe shouldn't have wouldn't have in a parliamentary system. Let's say Erdogan had the power to, for example, intervene in the central bank and changing the direction a couple of times in the last year. So it created a lot of uncertainty in the economy and especially a lot of rejection from foreign investors, creating a lot of chaotic scenes in the economy of Turkey. If there was a parliamentary system, there would be a bigger institutionalization of this kind of like central bank, the economy minister, and everything would be much more secure.
In July 2020, Erdogan oversaw the conversion of Istanbul's historic Hagia Sophia into a mosque. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, the architectural masterwork was built 1,500 years ago as a cathedral. It was converted into a mosque after the Ottoman conquest in the 15th century. But Kemal Atatürk, modern Turkiye's founding father, had turned it into a museum, marking it as a symbol of the new secular state. The decision to convert it back into a mosque following a court ruling revoking its status as a museum was received with dismay by the Christian world and much of the international community. While religious himself, Erdogan always denied wanting to impose Islamic values. Interestingly, the man challenging him in the next election is touted as the future of Turkish democracy. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is a former civil servant and ex-accountant. The Turkish politician has been dubbed Gandhi Kemal by the media owing to his physical resemblance to the Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi. The 72-year-old is the candidate of the coalition of 6 opposition parties. He was first elected to the Turkish parliament from Istanbul in 2002 as a candidate of the Republican People's Party, also known as the CHP. This is the country's oldest political party, which was established by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Now, the experienced social democratic politician is backed by 5 smaller parties in an alliance against the Turkish president. A soft-spoken man, he appears to be the polar opposite of Turkiye's flamboyant president.
Both parties and all political leaders believe this election to be existential, to be formidably significant. He's coming in with the idea that he wants to restore Turkey's status with Europe and also change the system from back to a parliamentary system from the presidential system, which was changed by a constitutional referendum. So again, is the table of six a table that is united? Yes, it's united in opposition to the current government. But will it be able to govern when if it wins the election?
Milleti tahrik ederek buna güçleri
Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu offer stark choices for presidency. Turkey is part of the West's NATO defensive alliance, but the Erdogan presidency has sought close ties with China and Russia. What kind of Turkey will emerge from the ballot box? While Erdogan accuses the West of trying to bring him down, Kılıçdaroğlu promises to steer the country closer to NATO and the West if he wins. The leader of Turkey's largest opposition party also says he will return Turkey to a parliamentary system of government. But defeating Erdogan, Turkey's most powerful man, will be a Herculean task.